We would like to take another moment to thank our sponsors, whose financial support helps make CapTime's Idea Fest the important event that it is. Special thanks to our presenting sponsor, UBS, the Burrish Group. They have been a major sponsor since the very first Idea Fest. Major sponsors include HealthX Ventures, Exact Sciences, and Quartz. Co-sponsors are Madison Gas and Electric, Godfrey & Kahn Law, the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and Epic. Our Friends of Idea Fest sponsors are Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, Madison Community Foundation, University Research Park, Cargo Coffee, Doc Smokehouse, and Forward Theater Company. Our media partners are the Wisconsin State Journal, Madison.com, WKOW Channel 27, and Hinckley Productions. Again, we thank you for your support and for making Idea Fest 2021 a huge success.
I am so glad you're here, and I hope you've enjoyed the talk so far. And I've really been looking forward to this one for months now about the Great Resignation and the future of post-pandemic work. I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Rebecca Ryan, in just a bit, but I'd like to take a moment to thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it. And if you are looking for further ways to support the Cap Times, I hope you'll consider becoming a member if you aren't already. You can find out about that at membership.captimes.com. One bit of housekeeping before we get started. You're welcome to submit questions to the panelists during the talk, but we ask that you use it doing note cards, which our volunteers in the green Idea Fest shirts have, and they'll take those up to Rebecca, and she'll work them in as time allows. So without further delay, I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca, who also gets our special thanks for developing this session. She's a noted top 50 professional futurist, economist, best-selling author, and entrepreneur. She is the founder of Next Generation Consulting, through which she partners with government leaders across the country. Looking a generation ahead, she outlines strategies in urban planning, economic development, and workforce development to ensure communities are well-equipped for future trends and challenges. Please give her a warm welcome.
Hey, everybody. It's wonderful to see you here. And for those of you who will be joining us remotely eventually, it's wonderful to have you as well. My name is Rebecca Ryan, and I am thrilled to be a part of this panel. I want to thank my friend Mike Korneman and my new friend Chris Murphy for giving us this platform and this opportunity to bring some big ideas to Idea Fest. So here we go. We originally shaped this topic of the Great Resignation during a time when the quits rate in America, the number of people who are just voluntarily quitting their jobs, this is not laid off people. These are people who are saying, I'm out of here, was at a record high, and that was this April. This April, people were leaving their job in record numbers. It went on to be called the Great Resignation. And people were saying, well, come kids being back in school, that's going to reverse course. People are going to flood back into the full-time workforce. We're going to see all the help wanted signs come down. And then Labor Day came and went. And you know what they're calling it now? The Great Wait. The Great Wait. What will happen? What will happen? So I'm joined by three rock star panelists, all with very different perspectives on the future of work. And I want to introduce each of them briefly, and then we're going to jump into our big ideas. And again, welcome questions from you. I'm going to ask a couple questions of our panelists, and then we're going to turn it over and have a discussion here before we close. All right, so first of all, joining us from Israel is Shahar Ahrez. He is the co-founder and CEO of Stoke, which is a platform to help gig workers, those contract employees in this sort of new, evolving, emerging economy, connect. And Stoke also supports, traditional companies that are trying to bring on gig workers, because for some companies, this is like speaking a foreign language. So he doesn't look it, but he's got 15 years of experience. He started at HP, he was at VMware and at Kenshu prior to starting Stoke. Thrilled to have him. He's been on NPR and is a good thinker, a solid thinker about the future of work. Jason Lauritsen, who I call J-Law, he comes to us from Nebraska, Gretna, Nebraska, and I call him a management whisperer. He has a way of telling the truth to managers about what is good, right, and the future of the way work should be. He's come out with a new article recently where he makes a couple of really provocative arguments around what the future of the workplace will be. I'm going to leave that to him. He's written 2 books, which you can see on his bookshelf behind him because he's no dummy. Unlocking High Performance and Social Gravity. Great to have Jason with us. And then finally, here in the audience, or here in the live venue with me is Mark Richardson. Those of you who are Madisonians or who have been here for a long time, you've seen him do a lot of things around town, from the Chamber of Commerce to the Urban League. And when he left the Urban League almost 10 years ago now,
we're getting there.
2013, I think it was, or
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
yeah.
2013. He started his own firm, Unfinished Business. And what I love about this, and I think the reason that Mark brings such a unique perspective, is Mark helps both those people who want a different opportunity, people like you and me who may have quit in April, right? And he helps organizations who are trying to figure out how to attract and retain the very best talent. So welcome to our 3 panelists. We're going to jump into the big idea, and here it is. Here it is. Panel, we're going to go Jason, Mark, Shahar, in that order. So Jason will go first. But here's my question. What the hell is happening with the Great Resignation? This is unprecedented. Nobody expected this. The National Bureau of Economic Research is writing a lot of papers right now trying to figure out what is going on with the workforce. So I wonder, each of you, what do you think it means for the future of work? Jason, let's start with you.
Big question to tackle in a few minutes, but I'll do my best. So here's what I think. I argue, or I believe, that there's 2 big things that are happening, 2 reasons that people are bailing on their jobs right now, often without something to go to, or they're going to something completely different, or they're sitting it out. I think there's 2 things. One is and I remember talking about this when the pandemic started, is that people will remember how they were treated when they felt unsafe. When this thing happened, they are going to remember how you get treated. We had this conversation early 2020, and I think it's a reckoning is happening now. Those people are feeling now like they have more options, and they're starting to say, you know what, I remember you making me not feel safe, or whatever it was, and now it's time. I think the other thing is people are fried, burnt out, and they need to they feel also, I think, a lack of control, a lack of agency, and so they're taking control of what they can. And one of the things they can control is whether or not they keep showing up to the job that they may not like, or that they may not believe in anymore. And so I think both of those things boil down to the same issue, and that issue is well-being. Well-being is a topic or an issue that's been important to, I think, the workplace for decades. We just haven't really been paying attention to it. We've bought into a narrative about work-life balance and work-life separation that was always a lie. It was always an illusion that life and work were somehow separate. And we all know that, we've all lived it, but for whatever reason, we all participated in this illusion. And we had these corporate wellness programs kind of parked in the corner, but then all of a sudden this pandemic showed up, and it really turned up the volume on well-being and the impact of well-being. And if we really step back, we know well-being has a profound impact, not just on how we experience or can show up in our life. I mean, the common definition of well-being is that it's really about human flourishing, is that well-being is really the study of sort of the core human needs that need to be met in order for us to flourish as humans in our life and at work. And what has happened is that, we know, and we've always known, that when, life gets in the way of things, when there's lots of stuff we're balancing in our lives, we have relationships, and we might have relationship challenges, we might have mental health or physical health challenges, we might have financial issues going on, we might be caregiving, we might be taking care of our kids' schools and worrying about that. There's a whole number of things that we have to balance in our life. And those things, these are needs that when they are pulling on us, they start pulling on these needs that we need to have met. Our desire for safety and security and meaning and health and all of these other things. When those things are pulling on us, it's pulling capacity from us, so that from a workplace perspective, when I log into my laptop or I show up to work in the morning, all of that stuff is going on in the background, and it is eating up capacity that I would otherwise have to offer that I can't even bring. And so well-being has been limiting our performance capacity as employees for decades. It's just now suddenly it's out on the table. We can see it. It was in vivid color. And so now we have to deal with it. And I believe that the future of work is going to be sort of defined by the winners and losers are going to be separated by those organizations who can really start to reorient their organization to support and cultivate the well-being of each human being that works for them or works with them. And in order to do that, I think, there's a lot of conversation about this right now, and there's going to be a lot of solutions thrown at it, technology solutions and programs and a whole bunch of things that we're going to want to grasp at to try to figure this out. But I think that the most important element, or the most important, I guess, tool that we're going to have if we want to create an organization that supports well-being is going to boil down to one word, and that word is compassion. Compassion, I believe, will need to become a core competence of organizations that are going to support and unlock well-being. And thankfully, even though compassion isn't a word that we often use at work, we don't think about it in terms of management and leadership very often. It is something that psychology tells us can be learned and developed. It breaks down into kind of the elements of it's really our relationship with suffering, recognizing suffering in others. But the magic of compassion is that compassion is about noticing that others are suffering, caring that they're suffering, having an intention for them to not want to be suffering or to remove that suffering from them, and then a readiness to take action. And it is that action that will be the sort of pivot point that moves the needle. And so I think compassion as a competency, developing it in leaders and managers and your employees, learning how to have that, to demonstrate compassion for one another, for the people you lead, not only will make our workplaces and work experiences work better regardless of where or how or when you work, but if you teach this to people at work, you may very well change their lives and change the world. So that's my sort of big idea about where I think we're headed.
Well-being and compassion. We've got a big job in the U.S. I think I read somewhere that the amount of narcissism and psychotic behavior among CEOs is I don't know, it's a big outlier for the general population, but I'm behind you 100%, Dalai Lama CEO. Okay. Mark Richardson, what's your big idea? What is going on? What the hell is going on?
Yeah, what the hell? You said I want to get that four-letter word in there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of four and five-letter words being bantered about for sure right now. I think all of what Jason said, yes, right? And that's the funny thing is it's a singular question, right? Mm-hmm. Like what's going on, like it's one thing, mm-hmm. but it's a ton of things, right? And depending on where you are generationally, if you're a boomer, it's one thing. Mm. If you're Gen X, it's something different. If you're millennial or Gen Z, different things, right? So what's causing the Great Resignation, or what I've been heard to be called the Big Quit, right? So I think different things are driving it in different generations, because we've got 4 within the workplace now working together. And so I think it's different things driving it in each of those generations. But if there's a thing that sort of stretches across all those generations, I think there's 2 things. One is the value of time. How do we value our time, right? What are we agreeing upon that we're going to spend it doing? And that goes to how are we treated, right? How were we treated when this started? Oh, you're essential. Well, pay me like I'm essential, right? And so there's a backlash within that industry, service industry, retail, right? Like, okay, I'm not feeling essential, and I wasn't essential last week, but now I am, apparently. And so, okay, so then let's make sure that my check reflects that, right? So you have a value of time, and I think that stretches across all sectors, right, and all generations. And I think we've decided, what do they say, 90 days to form a habit, right? So we've been in lockdown or home or remote work or hybrid or some sort of that for 18 months, right? So we have formed habits. We have fundamentally changed habits, right? So the workforce doesn't behave like it behaved. And I think it now values its time differently, A. That's thing one. And thing two is our consumption has changed. Consumption meaning we're not outspending money because we couldn't be outspending money. And if I'm not outspending money, maybe I don't need to generate the kind of income or revenues that I needed to generate. So now, maybe I don't need that job I had. Maybe I'll go get a different one where I'll be treated better, right? Or if I'm a boomer, maybe I don't want to work at all. You know, my 401k is in good shape, unlike 08, 09.
And went nuts during
Right?
the
So
virus,
guess
yes.
what? Maybe I just tap out. Or maybe I start my own thing, which entrepreneurship is through the roof for 45 plus, right? Because now they're going and doing their own thing because they've decided I'm not going to spend my time here. I'm going to spend it over here. So for me, if there's one thing, it's time. And from a solution standpoint, big corporations, organizations, you know, the money is there, but for me, it's not where we're spending our money, it's where we're spending our time. We should be spending our time in professional development so that we can have compassion. We should be spending our time reaching into new communities and forming what I call talent pipeline partnerships to start pulling talent from other places because we're going to need it. We should be spending our time developing talent profiles for our existing employees so that when someone bounces, we may have someone under our roof that would take that job or that wants to do that. But if we don't know it, then we think it's open when we could make a move internally. It's about how we spend our time. And we should not be stacked with Zoom calls and team calls back to back to back to back. We should not expect somehow, you know, to fall out of the sky like all of a sudden our leaders are going to be equipped to deal with this new universe. We're going to need to coach them up, and that means breaks in Zooms, breaks in the stack that's in my calendar, and it's about how we spend our time. To me, that is both the reason and it's the solution.
Yeah, right on. Preach. I can feel the amen that wants to happen in this room right now, right? Yes, I feel it. I feel you. All right, Shahar, my friend, nobody stands to benefit more than Stoke from this great, nothing can happen for decades and then decades can happen in weeks. Tell us your big idea. What do you think this Great Resignation means for the future of work? And maybe you even have some stories about what's happening for you with your platform.
Yeah, well, the public market will tell you there's a lot of companies that are benefiting from the pandemic, not just Stoke. But I don't want to underestimate the impact of the Great Resignation. But to be honest, the Great Resignation is yet another step in a foreseen evolution that we've had long coming of how work gets done. We've seen kind of this loosening relationship between a workplace and an individual for quite some time. If you think about it, over the past century, give or take, individuals' futures, careers were kind of dependent on where they chose to work. You got out of college. If you got into a good company back then, your mom was happy. You had a secured salary. It meant you're going to live in a decent location. You got great health coverage. And you climbed up the corporate ladder, if you will. And everything depended on the company you chose to work for and the boss that, kind of controlled your time. Over the past 2-3 decades, we kind of start seeing this growth or the rise of the individualism, if you will, where, stronger talents kind of, start hopping between jobs, got better offers. It kind of went hand in hand with the growth in tech. But this paradigm of my future is connected to the company that I've chosen about a decade ago, really. When millennials and Gen Z have started becoming a growing portion of the workforce. Cloud computing allowed anybody to work from anywhere. We started seeing more and more companies. By the way, back in 2019, before the pandemic, or maybe it's even 2018, there were about 2,800 companies in the US without offices. All were kind of distributed organization. So this did not start with the pandemic. And then it kind of hit a tipping point with COVID. People have had pretty much enough, if you will, tying their destination, their future to a single workplace. While they might be forced to this decision because of the pandemic, the realization is still the same. We've seen when the pandemic hit in Q1 of 2020, the first reaction we saw back in March, April timeframe, where the independent contractors and all the companies we work with were the first to let go. It's like, it was very obvious. Like day one, I don't remember which day we started the quarantines and everything, but independent contractors were immediately let go. The company kind of held close the employees and let go of all independent contractors.
I remember that. Yes.
The thing was, independent contractors landed on their feet within weeks because they invested in the network, their brand, upping their skills. They knew how to land on their feet when, if you excuse me, shit hits the fan. And so it took them a few weeks and they landed on their feet and they were back. But the second wave was when employees were starting letting go. Again, initially, if you remember, it seems far off now, when the pandemic started, everybody thought we're looking at Armageddon. And so employees were let go. And employees, when they were let go, they were like deer staring at the headlights. Like, I don't know how to find a job. I don't have an updated CV. I haven't been interviewed in years. I don't know what to do. And it took them months and months to actually find their next job. And so people were pushed during the pandemic to start becoming more agile, taking freelancing opportunities. And so they started developing this as a habit and kind of came to the realization that if they want to have a future-proof career, they need to control their network, their brand, their value, and not get stuck to a single employer. And people we see more and more have this understanding where they should get paid for the work they do, the value they bring. They don't necessarily need to be anyone's employee. We have this phrase that we're called, they're my employee. It's like, people don't want to be mine anywhere or anyone's. They bring value, they work hard to grab skills, and they want to get paid top dollars for their skill and not have their future income, their future as a whole rely on a single employer who on a whim can either give them a job, promote them, or let them go. You might call this actually, the era of the rise of the strong performers. In 2020, there's been a rise of almost 40% in the number of sole proprietors establishing businesses in the US. And people are realizing future-proof careers means flexibility, working your network, developing your skills, and most importantly, having lifelong learnings. And so I think what we're going to see as a result, and we're starting to see this, and some of those numbers are public, obviously, more and more people are starting to take freelancing, independent contracting jobs, topping their skills, having multiple employers, building resiliency that way, and not relying on a single employer that might force them into an office or start giving them some restrictions on how they need to work and where they need to work.
Shahar, I want to stay with you just for a second because I want to make sure everyone here and everybody who watches this remote understands what Stoke does. So could you give just a quick overview of what your platform does?
Yeah, sure. Sorry. So Stoke's a platform for corporates. If you think about what we've seen, the changes in the landscape of workforce over the past 20 years, the number of independent contractors has been growing 3 times faster compared to traditional employees. A lot of the reasons that I pointed out earlier, generational shift, cloud computing, internet connectivity, there's a lot of different reasons. By the way, a lot of people mistakenly think that employers are pushing people to become independent contractors to reduce cost. Actually, the majority of the trend is coming from millennials, Gen Z wanting a different social contract. And so there's a rise in number of independent contractors, but it's very difficult for corporates to deal with this growing number of independent contractors. Right now, it's valued by 30 to 40% of workforce are freelancers. It's expected to get to 50% by 2025, 60% by 2030. And for corporates, they have no mechanism of tapping into this market, onboarding independent contractor, handling budgets, payment, regulations, compliance. So Stoke is really building a bridge for corporates. We're not a consumer marketplace. We're aiming at corporates in its entirety, a platform to tap into the market and actually streamline the entire process of onboarding freelancers and working with them at scale.
Those numbers, I think, are staggering. I mean, just to play that back, 50% of workers are expected to be freelancers by 2025, 60% by 2030. I think those are BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics.
Correct.
Data points, yeah. So this is, this isn't armchair math. This is like the Bureau of Labor Statistics talking about this. Just a quick show of hands. Who here does at least some work freelance? And if your boss is here, it's okay for you to keep your hand down. That's fine.
That's half.
Yeah.
That's
Side hustle, little side hustle action. That's about half of our audience.
That tracks, right?
Yeah,
50%?
exactly. That's exactly right. No, you guys are not being recorded. You are safe and off the record. But I want to give my perspective on this just a little bit. What these quits rates and this Great Resignation tells me is that there has been confidence is swinging to the side of employees. And when you look at, since the 1970s, the middle class shrinking and the 1%, the Occupy Wall Street movement after the Great Resignation, the numbers are real. The middle class, as it's defined, has been shrinking. And so corporations, I think, for a long time have had all of this, sort of the psychological benefit of having the power in the relationship. And what the Great Resignation has, I think, proven is that workers are starting to come into their own. And I am really anxious to see where this all ends up. I mean, total econ nerds who are doing really good research on the future of the economy, the American economy. I read one paper a couple weeks ago. The word surprising was used in this NBER paper like 15 times. Economists do not use words like that. They might say variable or they might say outlier, but the word surprising was used again and again and again. And so these kinds of things should be catching our attention. We are living through an experiment in the free market system and in the relationship between workers and their employers at this point. And so what I think is happening is something, it is about well-being, it is about compassion, it is about the data shifting, the tide turning, it is about our relationship to time and consumption, and I think to purpose as well. And the thing that really cracks me up, and we're going to get into my next question is about this, is the number of employers who have said, but I'm offering a signing bonus. It's like if you are starting today to figure out how to attract and keep workers, you're already 5-10 years behind. If you don't have a high trust environment today, paying people to show up to the interview is not going to be the way to do it. And the final thing I'm going to say, I hope this is provocative, is if your business relies on paying people $9 an hour and they have to live in the back of your car, you might need to rethink your damn business model.
What?
Because that is not a sustainable business model. It's not for you, and it's certainly not for them. And I think this is an enormous opportunity with this quits rate to re-oxygenate the economy, to put different people with different skills doing different things. And in my opinion, it's like long overdue. So here's my second question, panel. There have been some epic screw-ups with what CEOs have done over the course of the last year. I mean epic screw-ups. And I don't mean epic itself, although there is that screw-up as well. I just mean large screw-ups. CEOs, executives have done some really, really, really stupid things over the last year. And so I wanted our panelists to take a crack at this is kind of like, to bring a little bit of levity to this, but also on the back end of these CEO screw-ups, what is the lesson we can learn from this? What is the bigger point of these screw-ups? And we're going to go Mark, Shahar, Jason on this one. Mark?
Okay, epic screw-ups. I like how you phrased that question.
Yes.
That certainly locally, that's probably one of the bigger examples. But it's not just epic, right? It's whoever the company was or is that says, you must come back to this building on this date.
Right.
Almost as if it's sort of picked out of the sky, right? So, and that was in, I believe, September of 20.
Pick a month in
right?
2020
right.
where
like,
a CEO
like, I
didn't
think that
do
was
that.
I think that was a year ago,
Yeah.
right around now a year ago. So, and we're in the middle of the first pandemic, right? This is before the Delta variant even showed up.
Right.
And so, if we're arbitrarily picking a date that you need to be back here, that goes into the category of epic screw up, right? I think any company who's done that and that will do that and is inflexible, I think that that constitutes as an epic screw up.
What do we learn from something like arbitrary date picked out of thin air?
Well, first of all, don't act like you know more than you know. In other words, we are not in the driver's seat as it relates to the pandemic, right? And so let's not pretend like we are. And so I think we talk about trust in a workplace. If you don't have transparency and you are old school, in other words, we're going to dictate when you come back.
Right.
Not the reason that you left was public health, and now public health hasn't caught up, but we're going to still say come back. So now you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. We're leaving for one reason, but I'm going to have you come back for a different one. So transparency, right? And quite frankly, if you don't know, say you don't know.
Right.
Don't pretend to have an answer you don't have. And I think I see that happening in different sectors. The tech sector is probably the best equipped to handle this because of who they hire, right? They've been in a way forced to build these cultures because they're employing millennials and Gen Z, right? And the expectation is different with those two generations than it is for the boomers and the Xers, right? So don't pretend like you know something you don't. And the communication, and this is going to come as a shock to sort of well-heeled, long-standing companies, communication is two-way. Yeah, did you know that?
It's so provocative.
Yeah, so that's, it's not just downstream.
Oh, huh.
Right? So you should be listening to your employees because they're going to tell you what you should and should not be doing. And just because C-suite is in one place and the employees are in another, you need to heed what you're hearing. So I think communication and transparency, those are the biggest screw-ups I've seen.
Good lessons learned there, too. And you can start those tomorrow. Okay, Shahar, biggest CEO screw-ups, and what is the point? What's the lesson?
So I'll piggyback on Mark's. I have a couple examples, but I'll piggyback on Mark's. Number one, I think it was about 6 months after the pandemic hit. There were two companies, I can name them. I actually have an email copy of one of those companies, large tech companies, that bought large offices in New York because they cut a deal with the governor there, or the mayor, sorry. And they built big campuses, and they sent an email to all the employees telling them they have to be in the proximity of the office, or whatever, how many miles away, by October of 2020. Because the mayor was kind of concerned that people are fleeing New York and he's not going to get taxes. And so they forced people to be in the proximity of the office, although they're not showing up to the office, so the mayor can collect taxes. So that was one screw up, I can say. The other one, I saw companies where they kind of wanted to keep an open culture. And so they asked the employees to have their Zoom always on. And so people were sitting just like I'm sitting right here with a camera and a mic constantly open as they're working on the computer, just in case someone wants to talk to them during the day, which really felt to a lot of people like Big Brother. Yeah. It's like, I want to sneeze. I'm sneezing in everyone's ear, for example. And last, from my personal experience and what I've seen is we've seen more and more companies that we started talking to them about the effects of the changes in workforce. We saw companies telling independent contractors or freelancers they cannot be trusted as employees, is not part of the core family. Wow. And companies are saying, we're a tight family, it's part of our DNA, like everybody in the office. And people that are still refusing to recruit independent contractors because they want full-time employees. There are 2 million tech jobs open in the US that aren't filled. And companies are still insisting on recruiting the same way they recruited a decade ago, regardless of the pandemic. And if companies don't start thinking differently about solving the problem, they're going to get stuck in the same place. All companies right now are copycatting each other. To your comment, Rebecca, I'll give you a sign-up bonus. We'll have a happy hour. You'll get something to your doorstep, whatever that is. But if companies don't start thinking differently and strategically and realize that the pandemic or the effects of the pandemic are not going to go as soon as everyone's vaccinated, but these changes are for good, we're going to see a completely different work environment from here on, not for the next year or two, from here on, and start thinking, how do we want our organization to cope with it? these companies are going to slowly vanish because people will not want to work for them.
Oh, thank you for drawing the bright line, Shahar, because I'm with you 100%. Like, there is no going back. I mean, just from a physics perspective, you can't move forward and go back at the same time. I mean, I haven't seen anybody do it yet. But in any event, okay, Jason, to you, big, dumb CEO screw-ups, and what do we learn?
Well, I'm going to piggyback on a little bit, or just echo first what Mark said, and then because I came prepared with a couple of my favorites, to along the lines of Mark's comment about saying, let me back up and say, I think any CEO that definitively says we're going to do this and everybody's getting treated the same, I think is a blatant screw up, because I mean, we've been doing that forever, treating everybody exactly the same, and that hasn't worked ever, and it still doesn't work today. But Goldman Sachs CEO David Solomon, put out the edict that everyone had to be back in the office by July 14th. And as part of his infinite wisdom in making this edict, called remote work an aberration and not conducive to productivity. He went on to say, I do think for a business like ours, which is innovative, collaborative apprenticeship culture, this is not ideal for us, and it's not a new normal. And then you had Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan doing the same thing. I personally think that this is less about what's best for their workplace and more so about the fact that their home lives are probably not good. They don't want to be at home. They want to be in the office. Nobody at home is like fanning their ego and telling them how smart they are. And so they want to get back in the office and have people around them to worship them. That's what I think that's about. But I think it's silly that anytime you're saying we're going to do this or that, that's all. I mean, I think we've learned that everybody has unique needs. We did research when I was at Quantum Workplace leading the Best Places to Work team. This is 6-7 years ago. We did some research to kind of identify what employees were valuing, what are the biggest things they were valuing and what they were looking for and what would keep them at an organization. And one of the top two things that they identified was flexibility. Yep. Like, this isn't a new thing. And the problem was they wanted flexibility before the pandemic. And they've had their executives in their organization lying to their face, telling them it wasn't possible. You can't do that. And they're like, listen, it would really help me if I could have a couple days off a week or go home early so I could pick up my kids from school. And it's like, no, can't do that. It doesn't work with your job. Your job just can't be done that way. And then bam, in March of 2020, we made it happen in a week. And the employees are like, okay, so now we know you've been lying to us this whole time. So when you tell us now that we have to be in the office to be more, innovative or productive, like, we know you're lying. There's something behind it. We don't trust you. Right. So that's I think the biggest one. But I'll add on, because I don't want to just echo the same exact thing.
Dude, you are on a roll. Keep going, J-Law.
The other massive screw up is Jason Fried at Basecamp, if you remember this one. Damn. He's been lauded as a culture genius as a CEO, and then earlier this year, they got some political and social debates on their internal message boards, got a little heated, and so they came out and said, we're shutting it all down, no more. New culture memo, no more internal discussions on that. And within a week, had over a third of their employees resign. And so I think what it all boils down to is, Rebecca, kind of what you teed us up with at the beginning, which is that the employees are seizing some control, right? They're taking some agency and realizing, like, listen, we know that you lied to us. Then you didn't take great care of us at times through this experience. I've got to take care of me. Yeah. And I think that's going to play out. That we haven't even, I think, scratched the surface on that yet. And I think I think those numbers for freelancing is probably going to be, I think they'll correct those, and those numbers probably go up, which is good for Stoke, because I think there's going to be a lot of people just looking for different options. Yeah. So those are my favorites.
Oh, those are fantastic. Thank you guys for bringing it with those examples. Shahar, I just kind of love that you have this email that went to employees. That makes me really happy to know that's kind of stuff gets leaked. My email is rr@RebeccaRyan.com if you'd like to send it along. I do want to share one. This isn't so much a singular CEO screw up, but we ran a huge experiment in the United States a couple of months ago. Half of the states in this country said, no, thank you, we don't want any more of your unemployment insurance numbers or in unemployment insurance because this is what's keeping people on the sidelines. And the other half of the states said, oh, please, we want to please keep this coming. And the states that said no to the unemployment insurance thought they would immediately see people coming back into the workforce. And guess what? Yawn, nothing happened, right? So they're no further ahead than they were before. Here's what I find interesting. It's become sort of a garden variety sport to just blame the workers, right? Well, people are lazy, people are this, people are that, workers. It's just more further proof of sort of workers getting kicked in the teeth, by employers, not being respected by employers. So I heard about this farmer in Michigan who his great-grandfather was a yam farmer and came from a long line of like family yam farms in Michigan. And he now is an entrepreneur, a very successful entrepreneur in Michigan. And he told this story. He said, my great-grandfather, he had some years of good crops of yam, and he had some years when the crops were kind of crappy. He said, but you know what? He never blamed the yams. So I think just generally, anytime I hear words fall out of a CEO's mouth that it's the yam's fault, I'm like, okay, big guy, let's pull a mirror up and let's have a closer look. All right, it's now time to turn it over for a little bit of audience Q&A. So I want to give you guys in the audience an opportunity to kind of get that rocking and rolling if you do have questions. And so we've got some very busy volunteers right now for Jason and Shahar who are fielding questions from the audience. But meanwhile, I'm interested to know if any of you guys have questions for any of the others of you.
The panelists, you're saying?
Yes, exactly.
Oh,
Did anything that these folks say tickle something for you?
Well, yeah, I like Jason's passion, right? And he's coming through the screen,
Yep.
which I appreciate. It's that treatment of, I think it was his original point. If we go back to the first question, right? How people are treated, right?
Yep.
And that doesn't cost money, right? That doesn't cost anything to have that compassion and to not yell at the yams. Right? Exactly. Don't blame the yams, right? So I guess I'll ask this question of Jason, and anybody can answer, but, what do we think it's going to take for that to be a commodity, for compassion to be a value, a lead value? What do we think that's going to take?
That's a really good question. I think what it's going to take is time. I think it's time, and I think this, I'm with Shahar in that this isn't, none of this should have been a surprise. Like, all of this was coming eventually. It just got accelerated. And I think that the fact that people are leaving at the rate that they are, the wake up call, the pain, I don't think the out-migration of people is anywhere near ending, the moving around, because at least my experience so far is that organizations are nowhere near figuring any of this out. They still think there's a finish line or that there's a right answer and aren't realizing that this is going to be a fluid situation. And so I think it's going to take some organizations that I think well-being is sort of being demanded. It's going to come, I think, up from employees, is that there's an expectation now that you care about me and that you're going to support me, not just when I'm working, but sort of more broadly. There's a different kind of agreement or relationship that we're going to be in. And I think it's going to kind of require that compassion. And then so I think it'll start to come that way. But I also think, like is often the case, it's going to take some courageous leaders who show us what it looks like and then go out and evangelize it, to sort of, leaders, especially executive leaders, love best practices, and so there's going to have to be some best practice kind of stories told, I think, to inspire others and give them permission to really do it, to lean into it. At least that would be mine. I don't know. You guys might have different perspectives on that. That's just my speculation.
Shahar, do you want to jump in on this? Do you have a sense of this? Because I have an idea, but I want to be deferent to the fact that it's nearing midnight where you live. Yes.
Don't worry about the time. I really do think it's a really difficult question, because on the one hand, the social side in me says that once we start rewarding people on how they treat employees, then we'll start seeing a change. The realistic side in me has a hard time seeing that coming. And, I saw researches just recently about, wealth distribution and how we incentivize managers and leadership teams, obviously in public companies. It's very much, dollar driven on all sides, and compassion and equality is almost a currency that gets disregarded. Right. I do think there needs to be more kind of regulation, but more social expectation. By the way, I think some of it is happening.
Yeah.
As I think about it, I'm kind of mumbling here. I think that millennials and Gen Zs will not bear the same treatment or feedback that our generation, I'm a 75 born, we're willing to take from managers. This generation expects a lot more social responsibility. They don't stick around if they don't get respected. So I think some of it is driving some of the change we're seeing. I had a friend, a CEO, that interviewed a software developer a few months back, and he told him, "Hey, I look at your career. It seems like you're job hopping or anything or something of that sort. Should I expect the same thing to happen here?" And the guy told him, "You never know." And so there's a lot more confidence to this generation about finding their next job, about quitting, as we're seeing with the Great Resignation, and employers will need to quickly readjust and amend how they treat employees, how they respect employees, how they respect their times and their family time. And I think we will see some of that change. I do hope that it's not going to be lip service, but a real fundamental change in how people treat other people, and not just as a means to recruit employees.
What's funny, the question was about compassion, and I think it's going to take pain. And when I say pain, I mean pain on the bottom line, right? The P&L. I think that's going to ultimately tip the scales. That when it hurts too much in your business not to treat people well.
Also, I think the reputational piece of it too, Vault.com and Glassdoor, like all these places, you can hear employees in their own words tell their story about what a, dumpster fire it was or wasn't, despite the comp or whatever it is. Okay, you guys, honest to Pete, we have a lot of questions.
How could we have that many questions? We don't even have that many people in the audience.
We have 350 people in the audience, Mark. My God, of course we have a lot of questions. But you guys, so first of all, if I don't get to your question, I apologize, but I'm going to ask these folks to go fast. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I only want you to respond to the question if you have a strong insight about it. If you're out, just tell me you're out, okay? We're going to do as many of these as we can. Question 1, how can employees seize control when medical insurance is needed? Or when you have to do sideline jobs, the 5-day work week is crazy, and we continue to run like hamsters in the wheel. So how can employees seize control when you have to have medical insurance, and that's usually provided by an employer?
Right. So how do you take control if you have to go through employer? Oh, isn't that that's a big question.
You may not be able to.
You may not be
able to.
Get married and have your spouse have the.
Okay. Right on. Okay. Anybody else? I'm looking at the screen. I'm going to the next one. Curious to hear these panelists talk about sustainable restaurant work culture and what needs to change there. Service charges versus tipping, healthcare, etc.
Looks like Jason.
I do have a point of view on this.
Go, Jason.
partly because I have a son that works as a bartender in the industry, and partly because I have a variety of colleagues and some clients that I've worked with over time on this.
You're also a
I
heavy
personally,
drinker,
I
Jason.
personally
I mean,
think
let's
that it's
just be
a
honest.
model shift that's needed. I think the model of, we're talking about inequity in pay and paying people, $9 an hour, $10 an hour is ridiculous. And then you've got restaurant where you're paying them a fragment of that, and they're dependent on the generosity and goodwill of the people. Like, it's a weird contract. I think that the brave restaurateurs that are modeling a new, creating a new model where they actually just pay people what they're, pay their value and take tipping out of the equation, and then provide them with real benefits and run it like any other kind of business, a service business, as opposed to this ridiculous model. So I think that's what it's going to take.
Raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour.
Okay.
Keep tipping.
Yep.
And give bar and restaurant owners a tax credit for the longevity of their employees.
Boom. Okay, there it is. All right, here we go. How does race and class and gender cut in the Great Resignation? I.e., are there different impacts among races and or classes and or gender?
Always.
Yes.
It always cuts different.
Absolutely.
But I also think that this activity is probably one of the biggest opportunities to diversify workforce, workplace, and talent pools that we've ever seen, because it's not just wanted, it's needed. It's not just the right thing to do, it may be the only thing to do.
And you're at such an advantage if you can hire in a remote first or a hybrid first environment, then nobody has to relocate. You can get the best talent. You can diversify your pool. Shahar, it looked like you had, yes, please, sir, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, I do think that what we're seeing over the last 18 months or almost 2 years now is leveling the playing field. It gives almost an equal opportunity. I won't try to sugarcoat things. It's not really leveling everything, but it is making things a lot better. I was talking to one of our clients I don't know, a couple of weeks back, and he told me that the guy likes piercing on his face, and he likes tattooing on his face as well, apparently. And he told me that for him to find a job, because people are looking at him, it's like, we don't know it's going to fit our environment. But when you're remote and he doesn't turn on his camera during the, the process being an independent contractor, once they get to know him and see the value he brings, then, he warms up to the relationship. So it gives an equal opportunity in areas where people are prejudiced. It's just the way we're engraved. And it kind of takes that off out of the equation.
I love it, Shahar, because that's the best practice in screening resumes as well, is to remove the name and the pronouns from the resume process. One thing I heard, by the by, is that there was a secretive HR report going out. I think it's amongst our largest HR organization here in the U.S., that was demonstrating that many organizations were, behind the scenes, the HR departments were asked to look at the pay of all of their men and all of their women. We've lost a lot of women during the Great Resignation, of course, and they're like, okay, if we're gonna bring women back to work, we have got to adjust this, or maybe be taken to court, or all of these other things. So that, to me, would be a huge net plus in terms of what is possible when women do start coming back to work. Jason, did you have something on this as well?
Nope.
All right. Next question. This one is for you, Jason. What does compassion and cultivating well-being of others in the workplace look like? Should it be packaged in a training program?
I mean, it could be. I mean, most simply put, what it looks like, I think most powerfully and most, initially is a very simple thing with managers, is sort of helping managers understand, which I think managers are sort of where a lot of the pain and friction comes in. But if you can get the managers thinking about two things. One is, what do my employees need? Like, where are they, what do they need that they don't have? And what obstacles are they facing? And not just looking at it through a lens of what's happening at work, right? At work, but broadly. And so getting them in that mindset, what do they need? What obstacles are they facing? And giving them some tools around how to check in a real way with people, in a human way with people, so that you can get at that stuff. Because I think that's one of the things we've learned in the pandemic is that, especially with those that were sent to work from home, is we learned that people are way more resilient than we thought, and they need a lot less supervision than we thought. And so what that does is frees up management capacity. So what should managers be doing? Well, find out what they need, find out what obstacles they are. That's your job. Get them what they need, get the obstacles out of the way. So that's what it looks like very simply in practice. Could be training. I think there's a lot of other things that you can do, but that's where I'd start.
Right on. Okay, we're gonna, just in the time remaining, we've got 3 questions left. Mark Richardson, what do talent pipeline profiles look like?
Talent pipeline profiles. That is a file, if you will, that you keep on every employee, right? And it should not just reflect their
Hi, Dick Cheney.
Yeah, right. Like,
okay.
yeah, like, oh, it's not even secret though,
Oh,
right?
okay. All right,
It's right out in the open, and it's not about how did you review your last 6 months,
Okay.
or it's about what did you go to school for? What's your life experience? What do you want to do, right? So like you did something before you came here, and now you're doing this one job. Do you have aspirations to do something else, right? And so every one of us, if you've got employees, you should have a talent profile on every employee.
It reminds me of like a dating profile, or like it's because it's bigger than just like what your current job is.
Right, because if that person's going to progress, which quite frankly Gen Z and millennials expect to, right? If they're going to progress, are they going to progress with you, or are they going to progress somewhere else? And so we should be looking at what they want to do.
All right, Shahar, I'm going to bring this one to you. How receptive are employers to the realization that they've lost the lead and need to apply true humility to their way of doing business? I'm just thinking about, from your perspective, you're probably working with some of the leading edge companies who are open to working with freelancers, working with people in different, what gets them there? What gets them to the point where they're like, I'm willing to think about things beyond just full-time employees?
So I have to tell you, companies are taking significant steps. I'm still not fully confident whether it's fully internalizing the change, or is it just, hey, we got to put a Band-Aid here. We got to give them, pay them more. The fight for talent is stronger. We got to give them better perks and things of that nature, compared to a real fundamental change that understands, okay, we're going to face a significantly different future and we need to restructure. And so I think most companies are taking the obvious steps. Again, I'm mostly dealing with knowledge workers. And so to your point, tech companies or highly paid individuals. And in these cases, again, it's higher sign-up bonuses, increased salaries, flexible terms. A lot of cases, a lot of companies are talking about hybrid work. You don't have to show up to the office all the time, but we still would like you in the office once or twice a week, things of that nature. I think we're still not at the point of companies internalizing, this is a change, employees are gonna look differently, they're gonna behave differently. We gotta develop a different mechanism on how we work, different communication protocols. We gotta empower our frontline leaders to understand how to recruit freelancers, grow freelancers, build hybrid teams of freelancers and full-time employees. I still don't see that sinking in. I still think most companies are playing defense rather than offense around how do we come out of the pandemic stronger and in the lead.
Yeah, so, okay, I believe that the toothpaste does not get put back in the tube. I think this is it, people. Like, adjust or go the way of the dodo. Okay, this is a 2-part question. And this is one of the most common things I hear when I talk about new work, hybrid work, remote work, which is, but what about the physical office? You know, we like being together, that sense of team. How can I mentor people, that energy? So the question, it's a 2-part question. Part 1 is, and you see what I'm doing here, 2 questions kind of kissing here. Part 1 of the question, sorry about my, I may have said on my mic pack wrongly. Part 1 of the question is, how can we keep that? Is there still a place for that physical office? But the underbelly of that is, what about loneliness? And what about depression for people who are remote, who choose to be hybrid, who are flexible, or even freelancers? So who wants to take the team environment? question.
The team environment component of that
Yes.
question. I'll take that.
Okay.
So yes, team environment is important, and there should, in my opinion, there should still be a team environment, and even yes, there should be physically a place to call home, right? Your work home, right? So to me, it's important to maintain that and to keep that for a couple of reasons. One is you're going to have people, quite frankly, that don't want to work from home.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. Not everybody wants to work from home. Not
like
everybody's
Jamie Dimon.
Right? Like,
Yeah,
hey, I don't want to work
exactly.
from home. I've got kids going crazy in the background, whatever, right?
Yep.
So some people want to be there. And so it may require from employers a change in physical location. Maybe we're downsizing offices,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I think it should remain because I think camaraderie is still really important.
Yeah.
It's just we're going to have to be dynamic about it,
Yeah.
and we're going to have to maybe schedule it, right? And so we're going to have to adjust. We need to be more dynamic in the HR space than we are now. We have to start looking at talent competitively, not as a compliance. Compliance is all about rules and SHRM. Don't send the SHRM police after me, right?
Right.
So, but let's not come at it from a compliance mindset. Let's come at it from a competitive mindset, and I think we'll be okay. We have to start treating it like we treat the other parts of our business.
Yeah, I like it. How about the loneliness part of it? Go ahead, Jason. I feel you
Yeah,
leaning
no,
forward
I'm
on
ready.
your-
I just because it's fun, I'm going to disagree for the sake of because I think panels are more interesting when we disagree here. I don't think you have to have a physical location. But the best thing I've heard said about this from an HR executive was talking about kind of how they were planning was they've decided they're going to be a fully remote distributed workforce, but they're doing what they call company on-sites. As opposed to company off-sites or having company on-sites. And this goes to the loneliness part of the question is proximity, face time, togetherness time matters. And the reality is that when you are distributed and then you bring people together for a period of time, you can do it with greater intention. You're much more intentional and thoughtful about what you do and how you do it to build relationships. That is rocket fuel. And then when you send people back home or you distribute them, they have the foundation for a much better relationship. So that's what I would offer up.
Very good. You guys, we are at time, and I want to be respectful of our audience. So let's give it up for Shahar, Jayla, and Mark Richardson.
We would like to take another moment to thank our sponsors, whose financial support helps make CapTime's Idea Fest the important event that it is. Special thanks to our presenting sponsor, UBS, the Burrish Group. They have been a major sponsor since the very first Idea Fest. Major sponsors include HealthX Ventures, Exact Sciences, and Quartz. Co-sponsors are Madison Gas and Electric, Godfrey & Kahn Law, the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and Epic. Our Friends of Idea Fest sponsors are Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, Madison Community Foundation, University Research Park, Cargo Coffee, Doc Smokehouse, and Forward Theater Company. Our media partners are the Wisconsin State Journal, Madison.com, WKOW Channel 27, and Hinckley Productions. Again, we thank you for your support and for making Idea Fest 2021 a huge success.